The PlayStation Portal is here, and this may easily be one of, if not the most divisive devices we've seen in a long time. I mean, for some, this is exactly what they wanted, a way to play a PlayStation 5 away from the screen or setup, whether at home or when you have to share the TV, or on the road, Wi Fi pending, earning the nickname the Dad Station 5. For others, this is simply a waste of money, a waste of time, and you should probably go play in traffic if you like it. I mean, Sony gave people something nobody asked for, and well, pretty much a $200 doorstop. For what it's worth, this has sold out just about everywhere through its launch last week at time of this recording. So the question is this a step forward for PlayStation handhelds? Or is Sony just looking for a cash grab? And I mean, well, this technically is a cash grab at its price, but you get what I mean. So I haven't done a review in a very long time, so bear with me on this. And here's an old review of mine somewhere on the screen. But also to everyone that supported my channel over the years and continue to, thank you so much for the support. I mean, it really does mean a lot. And even though I'm not able to create as much as I used to or wanted to, especially with the new job, I really do appreciate you guys giving me a few minutes here to talk about the new PlayStation Portal. As always, guys, if you like what you see, hit like, hit subscribe, click that bell to stay notified. In the comments below, let me know what you think about the new PlayStation Portal, for better or worse. And do not worry, I am here for the drag. It may help my algorithm. So for starters, I've been using Remote Play for years, at least nearly the last decade, from my day one Vita to play Madden while my dad and I watched games on NFL Sundays, to when I had journalism conferences on the road, and I would bring my controller and my USB cable to Remote Play my Mac to the same PS4. See, Remote Play isn't new, it's just new to many of these content creators you probably watch reviews on this for, and the mainstream gaming public who never really had a reason to use Remote Play. I have a backbone, and I've remote played on my phone before, so also the answer is yes, there are other ways to remote in and play on the road or off your main screen. That doesn't necessarily mean it's better, but there are cheaper alternatives compared to a $200 streaming device, which this is more of a streaming device and controllers than it is a traditional standalone handheld as we know it. This isn't meant to compete with the Steam Deck or ROG Ally or even the Logitech G Cloud to that extent. I mean, personally, I call the Portal a halfway handheld, where it's portable, but you're tethered to your PS5 sort of. It's almost a halfway point to a standalone cloud device, similar to that of Logitech's G Cloud kind of. However, whether on your phone, tablet, or wherever else you want to do PlayStation Remote Play, you're still tethered to your PlayStation to play remotely. In a way, instead of logging into a game server, your PS5 is, in a sense, that game server. The whole argument where, oh my god, your PS5 has to be on or in rest mode in order to play it? Yeah, that's how remote play works in general. That's how it worked back then, that's how it works now, and probably going forward. Also, who fully turns off their PS5 on a nightly basis? I mean, it's weird to see rest mode as hate on the Portal, but here we are. Like, you can't remote into a device that's completely off. Your PlayStation isn't in the cloud, and outside of PS Plus cloud streaming, which is a whole other argument, PlayStation doesn't do cloud gaming in the same way as Game Pass, even GeForce Now. At least not yet. So with all that said, what is the Portal exactly? Like I said, it's a remote streaming device that connects your PS5 in order to play off screen. It features an 8-inch LCD screen that is capable of 1080p at 60 FPS, granted you're in a perfect internet connection setting. The screen is surprisingly impressive, visuals look smooth and colors pop as you would see on a simple gaming monitor or even a small TV. For comparison, playing on remote play on your phone or tablet or laptop, you're capped at 720p at 60 FPS best, but considering your connection, you can get smoother gameplay at 30 FPS if the connection seems somewhat shaky. And then some phones, for that matter, are just over 6 inches, barely 7, and if you get any calls and notifications, it gets in the way of your gameplay. The default setting for remote play on mobile devices and laptops, tablets, even on PC, is 540p at 30 FPS or standard frame rate in the settings, mostly to keep the connection requirements low so you have fairly smooth gameplay and latency when you connect. As someone who's always had the console wired in, doing that actually helps with the connection issue a bit. So I usually did 720p at high frame rate when I played on my iPhone or my MacBook, but I was almost always in places with good Wi-Fi, so I never personally had that issue, but again, everyone's experience can and will vary based on where they are. For my weekend plus so far with the Portal in a house where we have gigabit connection and in a streaming household at that, I personally haven't had many issues remoting in and getting 1080p at 60 FPS. I hopped on some Madden this morning during the Raiders-Dolphins game, and honestly, it felt smooth, no problems whatsoever. I didn't even think about lag or anything of the sort. The other night when I was on Madden Ultimate Team on this, I had some guy quit mid-game, which I never thought would be possible considering I'm streaming and playing online. And it still doesn't make sense to me. However, connection isn't always perfect, which leads to my first fault for the Portal, Wi-Fi. I don't care that it's Wi-Fi only and that it's not a standalone gaming handheld. Like, I get that, especially for the price. Like, we would never getting PlayStation Steam Deck for $200. But the fact that it only supports Wi-Fi 5 and not Wi-Fi 6 feels like a big oversight, considering this thing only runs on Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi 5 is pretty much a standard in many homes. However, Wi-Fi 6 would have allowed for a much smoother, stronger connection, whether it's at home or if you're on the road. I mean, it just works better. A device meant for streaming only should have performance-focused parts. And to pretty much stay with old wireless technology at this point, pretty much not only seems lazy, it seems cheap by Sony. An extra $20 or so for Wi-Fi 6 parts wouldn't have been the end of the world for people who wanted to buy this, and I think they would have been even happier with the product, and people are fairly happy with it. Personally, I haven't had a ton of connection issues. Only some lag here and there when everyone is on a connection in the house, but having this be Wi-Fi 6 compliant, it really would have helped some of the connection issues people may have in a household, especially if their routers have to work with multiple devices at once, which is almost every household in the world nowadays. So if you have if you have a cable router from the cable company, you've been warned. Although you can play this on any Wi-Fi connection, the lack of even a hint of a browser for login purposes means you can't play this at a Starbucks or anywhere that has a login page to access the Wi-Fi, which can come in a software update if Sony continues to support this. But if you go to a relative's house or if you go to your office or anywhere that has standard Wi-Fi login procedures, you just put in the name and the password, you should be good to go, once again, depending on the connections. Moving on, the DualSense has at the edge of the screen feel, well, like a DualSense. I mean, this is technically speaking a working DualSense controller, just with an 8-inch screen in the middle instead of a touchpad. You get all the DualSense features, haptic feedback, and adaptive triggers, and you get the same motion controls that the DualSense has, a mic at the bottom, and better speakers along with the same buttons we've come to know and love. The sticks are a hair smaller than the main DualSense, but honestly, it's really hard to notice. In comparison, the backbone sticks are also slightly smaller than the portals. And don't even get me started on touch controls with PS Remote Play on mobile, because no. The Portal is comfortable to hold, barely heavier than the DualSense itself, and even with the screen and grips, it feels slightly thinner than the DualSense itself, but I don't expect many people to really notice that part. It honestly does feel like a premium product when you're holding it and playing on it. And again, it just feels like a DualSense. The speakers I just mentioned before, while louder than the DualSense, obviously, they're okay and get the job done. They worked fine, but in loud volumes, I've noticed some cracks, which leads to my next fault, the lack of Bluetooth support. Sony is releasing their Pulse Explorer wireless earbuds for these in December for $200, the same price as the Portal, but to have proprietary earphones for this makes Sony look ridiculously desperate for sales, especially when USB audio exists. Sadly, even with the USB-C put in the back to charge, USB-C audio dongles don't work with this. Trust me, I've tried it. There is a 3.5mm audio jack, so you have a spare pair of earpods or any wired headphones. Those should work just fine with the Portal, and you'd probably get better sound out of those than with the speakers. But at mid to 3/4 volume on this, the speakers are plenty loud and clear, so to each their own, however you want to take in the sound. The lack of Bluetooth to me isn't really just an oversight, it's more on Sony's selfish plan to force you to buy their wireless earbuds, which should have been an option more than a requirement. But that's how they do business with handhelds, as we've seen in the past. If you think about the original Vita, it was no different. It required its own memory card, its own charge cable when launched back in February 2012, and people hated that part. But the biggest question I have is whether or not this is right for you. As someone who loves the concept of remote play and has used it before it was cool apparently, I'm happy with the Portal. I mean, it does pretty much what it sets out to do, be a remote player for the PS5. I mean, my wife sometimes wants to watch TV after work while she's in bed, and I can just lounge with her and play in bed as well without having to take the screen or sit at my setup. I can play in the living room, and although I've yet to take this on the road, I can maybe steal a few minutes at my office and I already remote into my home PC at work on my tablet, so I know the internet there is good enough. But that's not to shy away from its flaws. I mean, the biggest really being the lack of Bluetooth or USB audio access, Wi-Fi 6, and even a browser login to public Wi-Fi. The latter of which can come in a software update, and I got a feeling Sony is going to update this next year. I mean, once the install base is strong enough, if it ever gets there. But personally, for better or worse, I like the Portal, and I'm really curious about where Sony takes this thing going forward. Also, Sony, please support this for a good while, unlike the Vita, which was dead on arrival. Like, seriously, this is a good product. Like, you could have something with this, and I'm really curious to see what you guys do with this.